Today on BRStv, we're going to add organic filtration to this tank. Hi guys, my name is Ryan. Welcome to another week of the BRS 160, where every week we do our best to help you guys, members of the reefing community, enjoy your tanks and find new ways to explore the hobby. We do that by following the setup and progression of this 160-gallon reef tank. This week we're going to explore organic filtration to reduce nutrients like phosphate and nitrate in the reef tank. More or less, this all revolves around using bacteria to process these nutrients for you. We're going to talk about theory as well as pros and cons of marine pure, live rock, vodka dosing, biopellets, nitrate reactors, and commercial additives and systems like Zeovit. Before we get too far into this, I'm going to state one thing that I absolutely know to be true. All of what the hobby thinks we know about this is really everyone's best guess based on applying some scientific principles to an enormous amount of anecdotal evidence. One thing is true amongst them all: they all seem to be capable of reducing or eliminating nutrients in the tank, but there are a lot of unknowns that go with that. More or less, the reefing community is just assigning our collective best guesses as to what's happening here. Since none of this is fully understood, the best advice I can give is emulate successful anecdotal evidence, meaning look for reefers you know and trust which have used the method with long-term success, meaning multiple years. So if there's so little known about this, why do it? Well, everyone will admit that an automated method of nitrate and phosphate removal is a pretty attractive concept to most reefers, and there's a whole slew of potential benefits, including preventing algae growth, coral and fish health, less reliance on water changes, cleaner glass, and potentially just a sharper looking tank. Let's start with the basics. Certain types of bacteria are capable of surviving in low oxygen environments by freeing oxygen from nitrate and utilizing it for biological processes. When it frees the oxygen from the nitrate is converted into nitrogen gas, which simply bubbles out of the tank. There are two basic things that are required for this to happen: a low oxygen environment somewhere in the tank and a source of organic carbon. Note, when I say organic carbon, I'm not talking about the black activated carbon commonly used for removing colors, toxins, and odors. Common sources of organic carbon are things like sugar, alcohols like vodka, vinegar, or commercial products like Red Sea's NO3 PO4X. So where are these low oxygen environments in the tank? Some reefers will use deep sand beds, but much more common is live rock and filtration media like large blocks of marine pure. Even though rock is a solid, it's theorized that water is actually passing through the rock and the bacteria are populating low oxygen areas within the rock. Considering the sizable amount of anecdotal evidence spanning decades, this is likely an effective method of biological nitrate removal. However, there are limitations. First, because the flow of water through the rock is presumably pretty slow, the nitrate uptake by algae and other unwanted pest organisms is likely happening a lot faster than the reduction happening inside the rock. There are two ways to help solve that issue. First is use a lot more live rock than you'd normally use in the tank. This can be done by either adding a bunch to the sump or setting up some remote tubs filled with rock and circulating tank water through them. Both of these will give the rock and its host bacteria a much better chance at removing the nitrate before the algae and other pests can consume it. Second is the nature of the rock itself. It's obviously much harder for water to penetrate and pass through denser forms of rock. To give you a visual reference, we cut a cross-section of some Bucani, Fiji Premium, and Reef Saver. You can visually see the internal porous structure of the Bucani and Fiji. There's an obvious pore network here that water can penetrate and pass through. The Reef Saver more or less just looks like a piece of marble, and the pore network isn't as visible, and frankly it feels dense as well. A while back we did a test where we took 1 kilo samples of marine pure, Bucani, Fiji, Tonga, and Reef Saver and soaked them overnight in water to see how much water they absorbed. After soaking, the marine pure contained over 2,400 grams of water, which is an amazing 2.4 liters of water inside that block. Bucani added 380 grams or 0.38 liters, Fiji 210 grams or 0.21 liters, Tonga 90 grams or 90 milliliters, and the Reef Saver just 60 grams or 60 milliliters of water absorbed. So while all these rocks have their own unique advantages, it's pretty obvious that if the goal is to use rock to provide anaerobic areas within the tank or even fill remote bins with rock for bacteria to naturally process nitrate in the tank into nitrogen gas and filter nutrients from the tank, we should select a rock that readily absorbs water and allows it to pass through. Based on this, if I were selecting a rock for this purpose, it'd be Bucani for sure. However, if you've been following the BRS 160 from the beginning, you'll remember that we filled the fuge component of the sump with the large marine pure bricks for this purpose. The tremendous amount of surface area and porosity marine pure has, in theory, should perform better than a much larger volume of rock and take up way less space. The next component to this is the size of the bacterial population within the rock or media, which processes the nitrate into nitrogen gas. The larger the bacterial population, the faster and more effective they'll process the nitrate. In most reef tanks, the largest limiting factor on these specialized bacterial populations is the lack of organic carbon in the tank. So even with a large amount of rock or filtration media, if there's a lack of dissolved organic carbon in the tank, you're only going to remove a limited amount of nitrate from the tank. This is where nitrate reactors and carbon dosing come in. Most common nitrate reactors work by utilizing a reaction with sulfur to reduce nitrate, but there are also some types that use organic carbon sources like alcohol or specialized solutions like that NO3PO4X. Reactors like this have been around for a very long time, used by large public aquariums and absolutely work. However, they're not very popular pieces of equipment at the hobbyist level, probably because of the space required, cost, and intimidation factor new equipment has. However, those that use them often swear by them. If you know you like to feed a lot, no amount of persuading is going to get you to have a solid water change schedule, then I'd absolutely consider a nitrate reactor. Outside of that, many reefers have started to dose organic carbon directly to the tank to reduce nitrate and potentially phosphate as well. The most common source of organic carbon being vodka and small amounts added every day. Again, the method absolutely works, but how it works is up to some debate. Common belief is the additional organic carbon in the tank feeds the bacterial population and causes a bacterial bloom, which consumes both nitrate and phosphate into their biomass, at which point your protein skimmer removes the nitrate and phosphate-laden bacteria from the tank. It's also theorized that the bacteria are directly converting some of the nitrite or nitrate into nitrous oxide or nitrogen gas, which bubbles out of the tank. In the end, I think it's possible all of these things are happening to some degree. One thing I can tell you is I've personally seen carbon dosing effective in tanks with poorly functioning or unmaintained skimmers, which means the skimmer removing nutrient-laden bacteria likely isn't the only method by which carbon dosing is removing nitrate from the tank. One of the reasons carbon dosing isn't more popular is because it's just one more thing you need to add to the tank every day. It requires research and a more advanced approach to the reef tank than most reefers are going to implement. This is where biopellets come into the discussion. Biopellets are a solid organic carbon source which is typically tumbled in a reactor. Using a solid organic carbon source like this removes a daily addition component and makes it a lot easier. The hobby's general perception of how they work is pretty similar to liquid carbon dosing, where the skimmer's removing the nutrient-laden bacteria. However, that really depends on what they're made out of. Well, they all look like small plastic beads. They're all made from very different materials, which isn't public information in most cases. I can tell you BRS biopellets are manufactured using PHA, which is a substance bacteria produce as a way to store carbon and energy for the future as a survival mechanism when these elements might not be available. That makes them a very natural carbon source produced by bacteria for bacteria to use when other carbon sources might not be available, such as in our reef tanks. Rather than be only dependent on the skimmer to remove nitrate-laden bacteria, PHA-based biopellets are a high-energy carbon source designed to directly stimulate anaerobic and aerobic bacteria denitrification, something we confirmed effective during our testing where we intentionally didn't use a skimmer. For those of you that are interested in a more in-depth window, this is an example of the process believed to be happening in the tank. Another interesting addition to the biopellet world is the NP all-in-one biopellet media, which combines a phosphate removal material, presumably GFO, and the biopellet media all-in-one pellet. Benefit is not only does a GFO capture the phosphate in the tank, but in theory it also makes the phosphate readily biologically available to the bacteria living on the surface of the pellet and improves performance. To use biopellets in the reef tank, you'll need a reactor to tumble them. They're not the easiest things to keep tumbling, and they will require more flow than your typical media reactor. This is one of the things where you get what you pay for, and something decent will require less maintenance. You also might want to check out the new wave of recirculating biopellet reactors like the one from Skims, which has the potential to combine the benefits of your typical nitrate reactor with the biopellet technology. Here's the thing about all of these biological filtration methods. Most of them are somewhat new and there's a lot of unknowns. While a lot of reefers have some pretty awesome results, others struggle. There are a lot of theories as to why they struggle, but it's impossible to really know. There does seem to be one fairly common factor, which is people starting with a brand new tank with biological filtration like this used to maintain ultra low nutrients from the beginning generally find success. It's the reefers who are implementing it later as a solution to already sky-high nutrients, which often have the most struggles. The two most commonly claimed issues are adding a system like this to a tank with really high nutrients can cause a bacterial explosion, which rapidly depletes the tank's oxygen levels and can kill tank inhabitants. Second is that explosion can rapidly deplete the nutrients in the tank, which many reefers can shock and even kill corals. To be honest, these are just guesses because no one can confirm the real cause of these issues. There are fair guesses, however I wouldn't treat them like facts because that stops us from looking for new knowledge on a somewhat unknown subject. For instance, I've seen a ton of tanks over the years with nitrates and phosphates were off the charts, where reefers did virtually 100% water changes. Not only have I never seen a negative impact from this virtual instant elimination of nutrients, all I've ever seen is positive results in instances like this. That said, big changes in water chemistry is generally considered a bad idea, and any large change in the environment can kill already stressed corals or fish. If you're going to implement a nitrate reactor or method of carbon dosing to control nutrients, I strongly recommend you do a series of 4 to 5 30% water changes over a couple weeks to get the nutrients down to near zero prior to implementing your new system, rather than using it to get them down artificially. This is drastically going to reduce the chances that you'll encounter any issues related to depleted oxygen or rapid nutrient reduction. There's one more element, which is all of these methods work so well at maintaining ultra-low nutrients that you might also run into some longer-term issues related to starving your corals of nutrients because they do require small amounts of nutrients for biological function. Some reefers will dose various supplements such as amino acids or carbohydrates to compensate for the ultra-low nutrient levels in the tank. Which additives you should consider using with your nitrate reactor, biopellets, or vodka is really not well defined and more or less up to the individual, which again is probably a big component of why some reefers have so much success with these methods and why others struggle over time. This is where commercial additives and systems come in, and while we'd all like to use something as inexpensive as a bottle of vodka, and that certainly can be done with some research, trial and error, and the learning curve that comes with that, I'd wager a vast majority of reefers would prefer to use something a bit more straightforward and comes with clear instructions. The two most popular within the BRS community are the Red Sea Reef Care Program and Zeovit. The thing that makes the Red Sea program attractive to most newer and intermediate reefers is how straightforward it is. There's seemingly an endless amount of additives in the market, and it's hard to keep track of what does what and which ones do we really need. Red Sea does a great job of putting this all together in something anyone could understand. The Reef Foundation program doses calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, and other macro elements for corals to build their skeletal structure. The Algae Management program, which is that NO3PO4X organic carbon solution, and it's going to feed the bacteria to reduce nutrients like phosphate and nitrate, which we've been discussing in today's video. The Coral Nutrition program, which is designed to feed your corals in that ultra-low nutrient environment the NO3PO4X organic carbon dosing creates. The program consists of two products, Reef Energy A, which is a mix of carbohydrates, amino acids, fatty acids, and protein flocks, and Reef Energy B, which is a concentrated mix of vitamins and other amino acids. Lastly, they have the coloration program, which is mostly a mix of different trace elements that have shown to bring out various colors in corals and likely improve health. Nice thing about this particular trace element program is they've tied the amount of trace elements you dose directly to how much calcium and alkalinity you use, which makes a ton of sense because corals use these things in direct proportion to each other, and test kits for trace elements are either non-existent or don't work well. If you use a calcium reactor or some other system, you don't have to use their entire system for biological nitrate reduction. You can absolutely use the NO3PO4X for organic carbon dosing coupled with the two Reef Energy products to feed the corals in the low nutrient environment. Okay, so on to Zeovit. Zeovit is like the founding father of organic carbon dosing on the commercial level and been around longer than most of us have been in the reefing hobby. There's always been a bit of mystery behind Zeovit, and straight up it isn't cheap, but there's one thing I can tell you for sure. The Zeovit system produces awesome tanks where the corals look amazing, grow rapidly, water is pristine, and almost always free of nuisance algae and other nutrient-related pests. One major downfall with Zeovit from my perspective is the dozens and dozens of tiny blue bottles and not even close to enough information in the marketing or packaging to help you understand how to use this system to produce the awesome tanks everyone knows Zeovit is capable of producing. They're going to kill me for saying this, but I think they could take a page from Red Sea's book by putting this all together into an easily recognizable system, and Zeovit would overnight become one of the most dominant reef additives and supplement lines here in the US like it is in Europe, simply because once you do understand the system, the results are undeniable. It's also really not all that hard. It starts with the basic four, which is the Zeolite Rocks, which serve a few purposes. First, they absorb various toxins common to aquarium. They also directly uptake some amount of ammonia, which removes the nutrients before they can break down into ammonia. But the biggest component is the Zeolite Rocks serve as a place for the beneficial bacteria to colonize and biologically filter the tank. The Zeolite Rocks are held in a reactor, which you pump once a day to get the mulm created from the bacteria off. The mulm is then either removed with your protein skimmer or feeds your corals. After that, there are only three critical additives: Zeobac, which is the special bacteria which feeds on the carbon dosing to remove nitrate and phosphate. Zeostart, which is the organic carbon source you'll be dosing to feed that bacteria, similar to the vodka or other organic dosing we've been discussing today. And Zeofood, which is a food source for your corals, which allows them to thrive in this new ultra-low nutrient environment. These four things are the core of the Zeovit system and the heart of running an ultra-low nutrient tank that prevents algae growth and brings out the best coloration in your corals. All of the other dozens of tiny blue bottles are optional additions to the system, and almost all of them can be used on any tank, regardless of if you run Zeovit or not, to achieve the benefits associated with this product. At BRS, we've attempted to straighten them all out a bit so you can understand them easier by creating four categories with the Zeovit system: elements and color enhancers, coral nutrition, and problem solvers. We already discussed the Zeovit system in the basic four. The elements and color enhancers are primarily all trace elements designed to further increase coral health and bring out specific colors in corals. Again, they'll work with the Zeovit system or in any standard tank if you want to bring out the greens, blues, or reds in your corals, or want to dose specific popular trace elements like potassium. The most popular of the KZ elements and color enhancers are the K-balance, B-balance, strontium concentrate, iron concentrate, trace element complex, and the KZ coral booster. The coral nutrition category of Zeovit products is primarily amino acids and other types of foods which promote coral health, growth, immune systems, ability to regenerate damaged tissue, or withstand stressful events. The most popular being the Coral Vitalizer, Poles Extra Special, or Sponge Power. Last category are the problem solvers, which are designed to solve problems in the tank like flatworms, cyano, yellow water, and other issues. Most popular being Cyano Clean, Flatworm Stop, Coral Booster, which complements Flatworm Stop, and Zeolife or Coral Snow. If you're not interested in running the complete Zeovit system but want to try out how the additives will work in your tank, the Nano Power package is a good place to start with four of the most popular additives: Coral Vitalizer, Poles Extra, Amino Acid LPS, and Sponge Power. If you're interested in the Zeovit system or any of the KZ additives, we have a link to the Zeovit system guide as well as the KZ product guide on every KZ product we sell on the site. Both guides are absolutely worth checking out. So on to the BRS 160 and what biological filtration we're going to select for this tank. I'd like to note that we could select none because biological nutrient reduction solutions like organic carbon dosing is not a requirement for a successful tank. End of the day, we selected to run Zeovit for a few reasons. The main one is we value the benefits associated with carbon dosing, but don't value experimenting on a show tank that we have a lot of time and money invested in. It's always the trailblazers who get shot in the back. The number one benefit to the Zeovit system is it's been around for over a decade, proven effective by thousands of reefers, and already tweaked and honed into an ultra-low nutrient system backed with proper nutrition you'll know will work. There's also a huge community of Zeovit users who are excited about helping others achieve the same success they've achieved with their collection of some pretty stunning tanks. Most reefers who try it and follow the system will get pretty excited about the results, become a lifelong fan, and want to share that with others in the community. This is also a display tank that we feature every week in video, so ultra-low nutrients is an important component of reducing the amount of work required to make it ready for quality video production, but the same could be said for a display tank in your living room, which you also want to look nice all the time, not just after cleaning. Lastly, we just want to go through the process of running a Zeo Tank for everyone who watches BRStv because the line of KZ products is such a mystery to most reefers. One of the senior CS agents here, Jason, is actually the guy responsible for taking care of the BRS 160 on a daily basis, and he's a huge fan of the Zeovit system. He runs it on his office tank here, which we've featured in many videos. The results are awesome, and this is an excellent chance to replicate that success on the BRS 160 for you guys. So there are a few changes here we have to do to this system to get it ready for Zeovit. One of the most valuable components of the Zeovit system is there is a system here to follow. So I suggest following it to the best of your ability to start with, which sets you up to experience the same success as others have achieved. First is we need to turn off this awesome UV sterilizer we installed. KZ does not recommend the continuous use of UV or ozone because both can have a negative impact on the bacterial strains important to the Zeovit system, as well as the decomposition of some of the additives from the KZ line. The Zeovit system also recommends that you do not use carbon in a reactor, and it's better run in a filter sock, presumably because the carbon reactor is too efficient and will remove many of the additives faster than intended. They also recommend that you use their brand of carbon because of some of the unique properties it has for the Zeo system. I don't know what those properties could be, but I think it's best to just follow the system as designed and not guess at this. We're going to use a KZ carbon in a filter sock and place it between the baffles of our sump. They also recommend that you don't use phosphate removal products like GFO because the Zeovit system itself will take care of that. There are 3 popular Zeovit reactors out there with the Vertex, KZ, and Skims. The Skims is nice because it's easy to pump and mix the zeolites, and it can be plumbed externally if needed. However, we selected the KZ magnetic reactor because of its unique magnetic suspension system that makes it the easiest to mix the zeolites every day, and we planned on putting it in the sump area. We're not going to have corals in this tank for a while, so we're only going to dose the KZ Zeobac, which is the bacteria, and the Zeo Start, which is the organic carbon for that bacteria. Once we have corals in the tank, we'll start dosing Zeo Food as well as a handful of other elements like B and K balance, potassium iodide fluoride, sponge power, coral vitalizer, and maybe a few others to make some of the corals pop. One of the nice developments with the KZ line is the addition of their new automatic elements, which come in small medical grade gel tabs that slowly release the additives over time. A lot of reefers will prefer that over dosing liquids because it's obviously much easier. Last bit on this is now is absolutely the best time to start the Zeovit system, which is before we add corals. We want to get the system stabilized around the new ultra-low nutrient system rather than make the corals adjust later. If you have a tank that's already up and running and want to start Zeovit, I have 2 pieces of advice. Start slow and don't attempt to use Zeovit to get insanely high nutrient levels down because you'll likely run into issues related to the bacterial explosion that will likely happen. Much safer, smarter, and potentially less expensive is to get the nutrient levels down to really low levels to begin with 5 or so 30% water changes over a couple of weeks, and then start your new Zeovit system to keep them low. Zeovit really needs its own entire episode, and we're absolutely going to do that for you right around the time we add corals to the tank, and we can show you exactly how to implement every step of the system properly as a true video guide to Zeovit. So expect that in the not too distant future. I hope we answered many of your questions about using biological filtration for reducing nutrients in the reef tank, and you came away with at least one valuable tidbit. If that's the case, do us a favor and let us know with a quick thumbs up and subscribe because we do this every week. See you next week with week 27 of the BRS 160 Refugiums.